When you hand one of horror's most unpredictable filmmakers a premise involving ice cream, murder, and absolute cinematic mayhem, you get a movie that could go off the rails in the best way possible. And if the name Eli Roth already makes you think of outrageous kills and harsh scenes, then this is a project built to remind people why he matters. Because love him or hate him, when Roth locks into a concept that matches his instincts, something electric happens. And with Ice Cream Man heading to theaters, it's the perfect time to look at what he does best, where he trips over his own ambition, and why this bizarre premise is where his style finally comes alive again. Let's break down Eli Roth's role in this new movie, what he does best, the Splat Pack special. If you've ever walked out of a movie theater feeling like you desperately need a hot shower and a long therapy session, but you're also kind of smirking at the absurdity of it all, you've probably just finished an Eli Roth flick. He's one of those rare directors who doesn't just want to tell you a spooky story, he wants to poke you in the eye with a rusty needle and then hand you a napkin while laughing. It's a very specific vibe, and honestly, the horror landscape would be a lot more boring without his brand of chaos. His journey into Hollywood is the ultimate fan to filmmaker success story. This is a guy who grew up obsessed with the 80s splatter era, the kind of movies you had to hide from your parents under the bed. He didn't just watch them, he studied them. He managed to turn that childhood obsession into a career that basically redefined the 2000s. From the moment he burst onto the scene with Cabin Fever, it was clear that this guy was not interested in your standard subtle ghost stories or psychological puzzles. He wanted you to see the messy and very grotesque visuals of skin actually peeling off the bone in high definition. His filmmaking journey has always been defined by this raw, unfiltered energy that feels like a throwback to the Grindhouse era, polished with a modern Hollywood sheen that makes it impossible to ignore. What I think is his absolute superpower is how he dances on the razor-sharp edge between "that's disgusting" and "wait, that was actually hilarious." He has this incredible knack for finding humor in the most uncomfortable, stomach-turning situations. Just take a look at the Green Inferno. The Munchie scene is a perfect example of a sequence that is absolutely brutal, but staged with such a wicked sense of humor that you can't help but laugh. It's that specific brand of sicko comedy where you're laughing because the situation is so over the top, even while someone is meeting a very tragic end. He really isn't interested in being nice to his characters. Think back to his most iconic movie, Hostel. He literally treats the protagonists like chess pieces on a board, where the only move is a very painful and very gruesome checkmate. That unpredictability is what makes his movies effective. You generally do not know who's going to make it, and usually the answer is not many of them. He's also a total technician when it comes to those big theatrical moments. He takes these everyday settings, a forest, a dinner table, or a high school, and slowly cranks the tension until they explode into these massive, unforgettable displays of practical effects. To me, when Roth is truly on, he's practically untouchable. He's an expert at creating these specific gory moments that you can't help but talk about the next day. He doesn't just show you a scary thing, he builds a whole stage for it, lights it up, and make sure you can't look away. You can tell he loves the craft of the kill, focusing on the textures and the sounds in a way that feels almost celebratory. It's the same infectious energy that kept him at the forefront of the Splat Pack group for years. He's a director who thrives on excess, but sometimes that very excess becomes the thing that trips him up on the way to the finish line. If you want more horror lore breakdowns like this, then hit subscribe. We're pushing toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and every new one genuinely helps us make more videos like this. As much as I love the Bear Jew for his sheer enthusiasm and love for the craft, we have to address the elephant in the room. And I'm going to be real with you, being an Eli Roth fan is an absolute emotional workout because there's this very specific, almost exhausting pattern that happens every time he announces a new project. The trailer drops and it looks like the coolest thing ever. Then he goes on a massive press tour promising the most insane, boundary-pushing, life-changing cinematic experience we've ever seen. But then the movie hits theaters, and more often than not, it feels like we were promised a gourmet meal and got served a very bloody but very cold hamburger. And the biggest issue that constantly drags his work down is the writing. It's the Achilles heel of his entire filmography, and it's honestly frustrating to watch. We get these incredible hooky concepts like a cannibal tribe in the Amazon or a killer at a Thanksgiving feast, but the actual scripting and character development often feel like they were scribbled on a napkin during a frantic lunch break. The Green Inferno is the perfect example. The concept is terrifying, sure, but the characters are so unlikable, and the dialogue is so thin that by the time the carnage starts, you're almost rooting for the villains 5 minutes into the act. Instead of giving us someone to root for, or even someone we love to hate, he often leans way too hard on the excessive violence to fill the gaps where the story should be. It's like he thinks if the blood is extreme enough, we won't notice that the plot has more holes than a block of Swiss cheese left in a shooting gallery. I feel like he sometimes forgets that for the violence to matter, we have to feel something for the people it's happening to. Okay, but man, we really need to talk about his PG-13 attempt to go mainstream. I think Borderlands was a massive, loud wake-up call for everyone involved. The movie proved that when you take away his ability to be R-rated and offensive, you're left with a very hollow shell of a director. It was a poorly received mess that lacked the soul of the source material and the sharp edge of a typical Roth project. It's a recurring theme where the overhyping leads to a massive sense of disappointment when the credits finally roll and you realize it was just okay at best. Do you remember the build-up for Knock Knock? It was sold as this tense psychological breakdown, but it ended up feeling more like an unintentional comedy with a script that didn't know what it wanted to be. It's like he spends 90% of his energy on the marketing and the cool scenes and only 10% on making the plot actually make sense. He has become the king of the great trailer, mediocre movie club. He knows how to sell a concept better than anyone else, but he always struggles to stick the landing. This over-reliance on shock value often stunts his growth as a storyteller. He gets so caught up in trying to be the bad boy of horror that he forgets to actually develop his craft. It's so frustrating because we've seen flashes of his brilliance, but they're often buried under layers of self-indulgent excess. This inconsistency makes it impossible to know which version of the director we'll get when we sit in the darkness of the theater. One week he's giving us a fun slasher, the next he's giving us a sterilized big budget flop. It is a wild ride, but it makes you wonder if he's ever going to find his balance. This brings us to his latest venture where he's trying to claw his way back to his roots in the most suburban way possible. But here's the thing, do you think Eli Roth is underrated or just inconsistent? Why this premise fits him perfectly. The scoop on 2026. This brings us to Ice Cream Man 2026. And honestly, this feels like the ultimate prove-it moment for this guy. After the massive high-profile swing and miss that was his big-budget sci-fi experiment, seeing him head back to the world of suburban slashers feels like a much-needed homecoming. The premise is a match made in a very dark, very twisted heaven. And why? Because it plays directly into his greatest strength. The total corruption of childhood innocence. There is nothing more American than the sound of an ice cream truck jingle on a hot summer afternoon, and watching him turn that joyful sound into a signal for absolute chaos. It's exactly what we needed from him right now. The kind of concept that lets him be as mean and as funny as he wants to. What's really interesting here is how much the modern horror landscape has shifted to meet him halfway. Roth actually credited the success of the Terrifier franchise as the spark he needed to finally make this movie. For 20 years, he had this script sitting in a drawer, but studios kept telling him it was too sick, too crazy, and too unmarketable. But seeing Art the Clown become a mainstream icon with unrated relentless violence proved that audiences were finally ready to experience the extreme. He realized that if a movie like Terrifier 3 can dominate the box office without watering down the carnage, he could finally unleash Ice Cream Man exactly how he envisioned it back in 2004. And his style of filmmaking is practically built for this kind of story. He thrives in those small town settings where he can take a mundane, friendly figure and turn him into a legendary monster. This is the same director who made us terrified of European hostels and holiday dinners, so giving him a colorful truck and a bunch of sugary treats is basically like giving a maniac a box of matches and a gallon of gasoline. We've seen this style work wonders in his smaller, more focused projects where he doesn't have a studio breathing down his neck to keep things accessible. This is where his mean streak genuinely feels earned and impactful rather than just being shocking for the sake of shock. Implementing his gore comedy sensibilities into a story about a neighborhood descending into frozen tree-induced madness is the perfect pivot. It allows him to move away from the scripting issues of big-budget dramas and get back to what he does best, creating visceral, high-energy set pieces that make the audience squirm in their seats. I honestly believe that if he can bottle that same raw energy he used for the Thanksgiving trailer and apply it to this 2026 project, we might be looking at a genuine return to form. He really needs to lean into the absurdity of the Ice Cream Man concept to give us the colors, the sticky messes, and those over-the-top kills that only he would think of. This is his chance to show that he still has that Splat Pack fire burning in his heart. Ultimately, this upcoming project is definitely his career-defining test. It's Roth's chance to reclaim his spot in the horror hierarchy by leaning back into the unfiltered, full chaos mode. Whether Ice Cream Man becomes a cult classic or another overhyped letdown, one thing is certain: everyone will be watching when it hits theaters on the 7th of August. While his brutal, gore-infested style is definitely not for everyone, he remains a talented director who always stays true to his visceral roots. So don't miss this movie when it hits the big screen. It might be the exact scoop of terror you need to really fall in love with his work.